Part 58. Adorable Baby, The Miracle Doctor is So Awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 571. Shen Yizi explained the origin between Li Si and them, and Xie Wangxiang expressed that he understood. When Shen Yizi tried to communicate with Li Si before, he looked like he was immersed in his own world, but when it was Xie Wangxiang's turn, he started talking. Shen Yizi and Gu Swiding looked at each other, and it turned out that they had no problem communicating with the same kind. Xie Wangxiang and Li Si communicated for a while. Although their mouths kept moving, Shen Yizi and Gu Swiding could not hear anything, as if the two ghosts were not in the same space as them. Finally, Li Si bowed to her, and his soul disappeared. Of course it didn't disappear, but it was reincarnated. Xie Wangxiang came to Shen Yizi. He said that he didn't remember how he fell into the water. He woke up after being drunk that day and found that he was dead. The person who found him and asked him to place an order at Zhenchan house was a full body wrap. The man was wearing a mask, and he couldn't tell whether he was a man or a woman, but he remembered that he had a black mole on his left ear. There is a mole on the left ear? Use this to find someone. When should you go? However, after hearing this, Gu Swiding's eyes moved. There was a black mole on his left ear. He thought that he knew who really wanted to kill him. Return to the house in Bronze Lane. Gu Swiding remained silent and his mood was obviously very low. Shen Yizi walked over, lay on his back, and hugged his neck from behind. Do you know the person with the mole on his left ear? Well, he is a guard in the Domain Lord's mansion, to be precise. He is Xiao Zhenjiayuan's confidant. Xiao Zhenyuan? Isn't this the Northern Territory Lord? That is Xiao Xiong's father. Shen Yizi was extremely frightened when he thought about it carefully. The guard naturally obeyed his master's orders, so it was Xiao Zhenyuan who really wanted to kill him. Why did Xiao Zhenyuan kill Gu Swiding? As if he heard the questions in her heart, Gu Swiding hugged her waist and buried his head in her belly. I have no personal enmity with Xiao Zhenyuan. On the contrary, because of brother Xiao, he has always treated me as his nephew. I can command him, yes, only the one sitting on the dragon throne. Shen Yizi was horrified. The emperor wants to kill you. But this makes even more sense. Although she has not stayed in the imperial capital for a long time, according to her observation, the emperor treats Gu Swiding quite well. Gu Swiding has no intention of trying to seize his throne. On the contrary, he has made many arrangements for him. Thanks to all his hard work, the chair under his became more stable. What reason did he have to kill him? Yes, what reason did the emperor have to kill him? Gu Swiding raised his head from her belly and said, I'll go out and check with Xiao Zhenyuan. Shen Yizi hesitated for a moment, but did not say anything about going with him. He knew her worries, stood up, kissed her on the forehead, and said with a reassuring tone, Don't worry, I'll be back soon. Okay, I'll wait for you to come back and have supper with me. Shen Yizi watched him disappear. Gu Swiding came to the Domain Lord's mansion. As the lord of a domain, Xiao Zhenyuan has a lot of affairs on weekdays and has countless things to deal with. The lights in the study are still on. Gu Swiding has been to the Domain Lord's mansion several times and knows the layout of the place very clearly. He appeared directly outside the study. As the most important place in the entire mansion, the study room was naturally well guarded. There were countless guards and secret guards around, but no one noticed Gu Swiding's arrival. Because he has built a space around him, even if he appears in front of everyone's eyes, he is actually not in the same space as them, so he will naturally not be discovered by them. He just walked into the study directly. No one noticed. Xiao Zhenyuan is sitting behind a large black desk handling official duties. With deep wrinkles between his brows and deep nasolabial folds, the whole person looks very majestic and inaccessible. Gu Swiding stood in front of the desk and looked at the man he had previously called Uncle Xiao. Xiao Zhenyuan was, after all, a master who was close to perfecting chi refining. He was naturally aware of his direct gaze and raised his head from the document, but there was nothing in front of him. Is it his imagination? Xiao Zhenyuan rubbed his forehead and felt that he must have been too busy recently, which made him a little suspicious. But the next moment, the hair on his body stood up. Gu Swiding walked out of thin air and stood less than a foot away from him. Xiao Zhenyuan was inexplicably horrified, but he managed to calm down and managed a smile. Shueting, why are you here? You didn't even say hello to uncle. Gu Swiding just wanted to know the truth at this moment, and without a word of nonsense, he directly attacked Xiao Zhenyuan. Xiao Zhenyuan flew back from behind the desk and shouted, "Here comes someone." However, this sentence was like a mud cow drowning in the sea, and received no response. With his heart beating wildly, Xiao Zhenyuan tried to jump out of the study room from the window, but he jumped out. When he landed, he was still in the study room, and even appeared in front of Gu Swiding. He raised his hand and slashed a space blade. Xiao Zhenyuan narrowly escaped, but a piece of his shoulder was still cut off, and the pain made his face twitch. Shueting, do you have any misunderstanding about Uncle Xiao? Before coming to the study, Gu Swiding had already gone to Luo Song, the guard with the mole on his left ear, and used truth pills to get words out of his mouth. At this moment, after hearing Xiao Zhenjiayuan's words, he almost wanted to sneer, and his men kept attacking. Although Xiao Zhenjiayuan's cultivation is close to qi refining perfection, the difference between qi refining perfection and qi refining perfection is also very big. What's more, Gu Swiding is a space system with powerful attack power, and he has Luo Yao Yao, a big boss in the upper world. His teachings and strength are far beyond what Xiao Zhenyuan can match. He was beaten in a few blows and was unable to fight back. Gu Swiding shot an immobilizing talisman to freeze him in place, but the emperor ordered you to kill me. It was obviously a very cold day, but Xiao Zhenyuan had a big sweat dripping down his forehead. Gu Swiding's tone was extremely cold. Uncle Xiao, you have to think clearly before answering. Yes, Xiao Zhenyuan finally spit out one word. After Gu Swiding received the answer, he ignored him and turned to leave. Xiao Zhenyuan let out a long breath. At that moment, he really felt that his life was hanging by a thread. Looking at the direction in which Gu Swiding disappeared, he fell into deep thought. Although Gu Swiding, the Chen King, has always kept a low profile, his strength and means are impressive, and no one knows how much power he has accumulated in private. Once he confronts the emperor, Tianyuan is afraid that things will change. However, this may not be an opportunity for their Xiao family. Gu Swiding looked through the mountain and river mirror and appeared in the emperor's palace in an instant. The emperor was sleeping soundly when suddenly he felt cold all over his body. He woke up from the cold and found that the quilt had fallen to the ground. He always sleeps well, why would he kick the quilt under the bed? As he was picking up the quilt, a pair of black boots suddenly appeared in the emperor's sight, with snowflakes still on them. He slowly looked up, and when Gu Swiding's face came into view, his heart instantly jumped into his throat. This is a dream, right? It must be a dream. Just like the woman Rong Xian'er, she used the dream entrance technique to come to his dream. The emperor pinched himself secretly. It hurts so much. It's not a dream. Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 572. Shueting, aren't you at the border? Why did you suddenly come to my dormitory at night? The emperor swallowed, resisted the urge to retreat, and sat stiffly on the bed. Gu Swiding walked towards him step by step, and although he landed silently, the emperor felt that every step he took was like a heavy drumstick, hitting his heart hard, making his heart beat uncontrollably. The room was so quiet that he suspected that Gu Swiding could hear his heartbeat. Finally, when he was 3 steps away from the emperor, Gu Swiding stopped. At such a close distance, The emperor could clearly feel the cold air emanating from his body. It was a real cold air, rather than the inexplicable coldness brought about by his aura. Of course, his momentum at the moment was not small, and the emperor was overwhelmed. His hand quietly went to the bottom of the pillow, where there was a messenger talisman given to him by the imperial preceptor. As long as he crushed it, the imperial preceptor would come over immediately. Unfortunately, the moment he touched the talisman, Goose Whitting flicked his fingers and a truth pill fell into his mouth. It continued unabated and slid directly down his throat and into his belly. The emperor was so choked that his eyes popped out. He coughed for a while holding his neck, trying to vomit the thing out, but all he vomited out was acidic water. "What did you give me to eat?" the emperor asked sharply. Goose Whitting had no desire to talk to him at this time and went straight to the topic. "Why do you want to kill me?" "He knows." The emperor was horrified. What frightened him even more was that he was clearly thinking of denying and fooling him, but his mouth was out of his control. "That wrong Siener threatened me. If I don't release the people from the immortal medical sect, I will tell you my secret. I can only take action to get rid of you." "What secret?" "Cannot say." The emperor screamed crazily in his heart, but his mouth had a will of its own. "I stole your mother's body and wanted people from the corpse refining sect to resurrect her." Goose Whitting's eyes flashed with cold light, and the emperor's heart skipped a beat, almost thinking that he would die under his gaze. His eldest brother has always had such dirty thoughts. Thinking back now, he cared so much about him when he was a child, even treating his younger brother better than his own son. In fact, at that time, he had already had unethical thoughts about his mother, so he was loving the house and the bird towards him. It's useless for him to think that this eldest brother really has deep brotherly love for him. When he asked about his mother's affairs, he was not defensive at all, and even took the initiative to tell him about her mother's affairs. This beast who has no regard for human ethics. Now that Goose Whitting knows the truth, the more he recalls the past, the more he hates it, both for him and for himself. The emperor saw him staring at him with red eyes and the black magic lines looming on his forehead. His heart skipped a beat. He knew that he was about to fall ill. He was so frightened that he climbed down from the other side of the dragon bed and tried to stay away from him. Unfortunately, before his feet even touched the ground, Goose Whitting grabbed him back with a hand, and his neck fell into his hands. Goose Whitting threw him to the ground hard and walked towards him full of evil aura. The emperor was so frightened that he couldn't help but tremble. He got up and grabbed things and threw them at him. Teacups, vases, inkstones, he smashed whatever he caught. After a while, the palace became a mess, but this still couldn't stop Goose Whitting. "Near which hand touched her?" He squatted down in front of the emperor, his tone calm, as if he was asking an ordinary question. However, the emperor was scared to death. He is calm, which means that he is more determined to kill him. The emperor's lips trembled. "I touched it with both hands." As he spoke, his expression became extremely frightened. It was clear that this was not what he wanted to say. Goose Whitting smiled instead, making the emperor feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He took his hand and crushed his finger bones inch by inch. The fingers were connected to the heart, and the finger bones were crushed. The pain was really unbearable for ordinary people. "Ah!" the emperor cried out in extreme pain. However, the entire temple seemed to be isolated, and the movement inside was not transmitted outside at all. As a result, such a big change happened inside, and no one came in to take a look. Goose Whitting took his time and crushed all the finger bones of the emperor's other hand. The emperor was rolling on the ground in pain, looking at Goose Whitting with eyes full of hatred, as strong as real. "Little beast! I have treated you like my own son for so many years in vain. How dare you treat me so cruelly in the end? If I had known this, I should have eradicated you back then." Rather than sending him to the border, We gave him the opportunity to increase his strength and power. Gu Swiding calmed down at this moment and looked at him indifferently, his eyes as indifferent as looking at insects on the ground. This is what you have been thinking all along, right? The emperor just kept talking because he was in extreme pain. After saying this, he realized the situation he was in at the moment. Life and death depended on Gu Swiding's thoughts. A wave of fear surged up and his body couldn't help but shrink back. Gu Swiding raised his hand, and a space blade was brewing at his fingertips. The emperor's heart shrank suddenly, and a huge fear of death enveloped him. He wanted to beg for mercy, but his throat felt like it was stuck and he couldn't spit out a word. At this moment, a sigh sounded in the empty hall. The figure of National Preceptor Chu Yongkang suddenly appeared in mid-air. The emperor was overjoyed the moment he saw him. The imperial advisor was here and he was saved. It's a pity that he thought too beautifully. Chu Yongkang came down and said, "Your Highness, King Chen, the emperor has dragon energy to protect his body. If you kill him, you will be backlashed by the dragon energy and haunted by the evil dragon. By then, your cultivation and luck will be greatly damaged. It is really not a wise move. Why not ask for help?" The emperor looked at him as if he had been struck by lightning, as if he had just met him on the first day. Then he was furious. "Chu Yongkang, I gave you the position of national master and gave you the supreme respect, but you actually treat me like this." Chu Yongkang was so accused by him, but instead of showing any shame, he actually smiled. "Your Majesty, it is not you who gave me the position of national master, but I, as a result of my condescension, tried my best to be this national master. All the splendor and wealth in the world are nothing but flashy to me. If it were not for the prosperity of the Tianyuan Empire, the national master can also share some luck and help me practice. Do you think I will be willing to act with you?" Acting? Does he think he is an actor on stage? The emperor's eyes were about to burst, and he wished he could rush up and bite him to death. Chu Yongkang looked at Gu Swiding and spoke sincerely, "King Chen, the Tianyuan Empire still has a lot of power. It doesn't matter if Gu Kongyu dies, but you can't do it, otherwise the debt of karma will be too heavy. It's best to leave it to the next person the first emperor takes action. If you are at ease, you can leave this matter to me and I will ensure that you will not be implicated." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 573. Gu Kongyu is the emperor's name, but no one has dared to call him by his name. When he heard his name coming out of Chu Yongkang's mouth, he still didn't react. While Chu Yongkang was speaking, his eyes were always focused on the space blade hanging on Gu Swiding's fingertips, as if he was afraid that he would accidentally shoot it out. Of course, what he was worried about was not the emperor's life, but the debt Gu Swiding would bear if he killed him. "Why did the imperial master spare no effort to help me?" Gu Swiding put his hands behind his back, and the space blades on his fingertips also disappeared. Chu Yongkang breathed a sigh of relief, and the smile on his face widened. "I'm not helping you, I'm helping myself. There will be something in the future that I will need the help of His Highness, King Chen, so I will establish a good relationship with you in advance. As for what the specific matter is, I can't be sure now. I can only calculate that His Highness King Chen can help me avoid that disaster. Gu Swiding is the one who can help him avoid disaster. Naturally, he cannot suffer any harm because of Gu Kongyu, a scumbag. Otherwise, what will he do when he faces disaster in the future?" This is Chu Yongkang's logic. Gu Swiding looked at the emperor, the red light in his eyes appearing and disappearing, and finally disappeared, and his eyes completely returned to black. He turned and left without saying a word. The emperor's breath that he was holding was released, and he gasped for air. However, he was relieved too early. Chu Yongkang walked towards him and said, "Your Majesty, you can spend the rest of your life in bed from now on." The emperor's pupils instantly shrank to the size of a pinhead, and he wanted to say something, but the next moment his vision went dark and he fainted. After Gu Swiding left, he went directly to the tomb of his mother in Prince Chen's mansion and sat down against the stone tablet. It is currently a snowy winter in the north, but in the imperial capital located in the hinterland, it is still the golden autumn season, and the nights are only a little cold, far from freezing. Gu Swiding stared at the night sky blankly, his mind a little confused. At the same time, in Bamiao City in the north, Gu Mansion. Shen Yizi entered the space after Gu Swiding left. She had been thinking about the egg given by the pet shop owner during the day. As soon as she came in, she heard a commotion of chickens and dogs. The pets she brought in were all released by Qingbao and the other three, and they are now running wild everywhere. The little fox chased the poor chickens in the chicken farm, and the hens cackled. The little iron-eating beast held an iron pot and chewed it with relish. The little snow leopard jumped up to the tree and took a bite of the fruit on the branch. Then it jumped onto a big green cow. As soon as the pets entered the space, their wild nature was completely released, and the three of them, Qingbao, also started to make a fuss, so don't be too happy. Among them, the rabbits in the nest were the most well-behaved. They grazed quietly on the grass, like snowballs, and did not move for a long time. Shen Yizi's heart has been trained to be very tough now. This level of fussing is completely trivial and does not stir up any ripples in her heart. She calmly warned, "Run slower, be careful not to fall." Then he leaned against the tree trunk with his arms folded and watched them making trouble. "By the way, I took out the photo stone and recorded the scene so that I could show it to my parents on Kunling Island. Mom, why don't you come and play with us?" Qingbao ran over, took Shen Yizi's hand and dragged her into the turbulent position. Shen Yizi then started making trouble with the children. In the end, she played better than Qingbao and the others. In this regard, Shen Yizi said, "Who doesn't have a little Gongju in his heart?" Seeing that it was getting late, she drove the three little guys into their bedroom like a hen herding her chicks. "Okay, it's bedtime. Go to bed and get up and play again tomorrow." The three little guys each lay down on their own beds and pulled up the quilts to cover themselves. Shen Yizi picked up a book called Shen Yizhi and read them a few pages as a bedtime story. Stories of the divine records various supernatural things that the author has seen in the world of immortality, as well as some battles with monsters. The author's writing skills are very good, and he writes an adventure in a very interesting way. Shen Yizi had already noticed it. After the three children fell asleep, she closed the book, turned off the light, leaving only a dim and soft floor lamp, and quietly exited the room. Shen Yizi entered her studio. The egg was lying in the wooden basin on the workbench. There was only a shallow layer of the spiritual liquid she asked the puppet to pour into the wooden basin. "It has only been less than a day, and I have absorbed so much spiritual fluid. The surface of the dome that has absorbed the spiritual liquid is no longer the original dark white color, but has turned into a jade-like crystal white color, seeming to exude a faint brilliance, and even reveals light golden cloud patterns. Look carefully, it seems to have grown a circle." Shen Yizi vaguely felt that this egg was not simple, and was it really an ice bluebird egg as the shop owner said? She poured some more spiritual liquid into it. When the dome touched the spiritual liquid, it was like a sudden rain after a long drought. The spiritual liquid was sucked into the egg like a whale sucking water. The water level in the basin dropped at a speed visible to the naked eye, and soon there was only a shallow layer left. Shen Yizi put his hand on the eggshell and felt a joyful emotion and desire coming from inside. It still wants it. This egg is quite appetizing. It is still an egg that can eat spiritual energy, and when it is born. Just when he thought about it, the eggshell cracked open. Shen Yizi. It really comes to whatever you want. At this moment, A stronger desire came from the egg. The desire for spiritual energy and life reached the bottom of her heart. Shenyazi was slightly shocked, and poured the spiritual liquid into it again, and also added some elixirs such as Yang and Dan to replenish vitality. The egg shell cracked and cracked while absorbing the spiritual energy crazily. Finally, the upper part of the egg was completely pushed open, and a soft, cute, and wet little head popped out, followed closely by two pink and tender little paws. The little guy's eyelids opened and closed a few times, and his eyes became clear. A pair of foggy blue Kazillan's big eyes looked right at her. It called softly to her, its voice was grandma-like, and its eyes were full of attachment. Shenyazi, I guess he thinks of her as his mother. The little guy chewed his own eggshell into his stomach, and then happily turned around twice in the wooden basin. Shenyazi saw its appearance clearly and was sure that this was definitely not the baby of the ice blue bird, because it was not a bird at all. It has a round body and 4 claws under its abdomen. If you look closely, you can see 2 small horns on its head, and there are 2 transparent whiskers on both sides of its nostrils. How does this look? It looks like a legendary dragon. Shenyazi took a photo of it and sent it to Yang Shengqing, and asked him, "What is this?" "Yang Shengqing, where did you get a baby dragon?" "It's really a dragon." "Shenyazi, it was a gift from someone else." Yang Shengqing. Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 574. Shenyazi, really? Then he told the whole story. Only then did Yang Shengqing believe it. Then send her a package. Take good care of it. When it grows up, you can walk sideways in the world of immortality. Of course, the premise is to grow up. And the dragons have a long lifespan, with their infancy lasting 500 years and their adulthood reaching 1,800 years. Shenyazi was very happy at first, thinking that she had picked up a big leak, but after understanding the information, she looked up at the sky. She doesn't know yet whether she can survive until the dragon in front of her reaches adulthood. Furthermore, this young dragon may not necessarily belong to her. The dragon egg was brought out of the raging snow sea by the pet shop owner, so its parents might also be in the raging snow sea. It is difficult for the dragon family to give birth. After finally laying an egg, how could they allow their children to wander outside? At that time, we have to come to the door. Although she could always keep the baby dragon in the space, how could she bear the thought that its parents might be anxiously looking for her? It's not that she is very kind, but that she is also a mother and can best understand the heart of a parent. Shenyazi touched the little dragon and thought that he must find an opportunity to send it to its parents. Let's keep it for now. She received the package sent to her by Yang Shengqing and opened it to find several jade bottles. The jade bottles were filled with elixirs and exuded a refreshing fragrance. Before she could ask any questions, Yang Shengqing sent a message, "This is a pill I made in my spare time. It is suitable for newborn cubs. You can take it and feed it to the little dragon." Shenyazi, "Thank you, boss." She also sent a package, which was full of food. It is made of monster meat, which naturally comes from the previous battle in Shenhaiguan. The tide of beasts ended, but the corpses of monster beasts were left on the ground. Among them, the most powerful giant bear and ice python were put away by her. She also picked up some of the rest. The selection criterion was that their fur was beautiful. Or it looks delicious when it looks plump and stocky. After bringing in the monsters, she asked the puppets to deal with them. The useful parts were sorted, and the useless ones were thrown directly to the ground for 11 soil to absorb. As a result, there were a lot of ingredients in her warehouse. She made a lot of them and put them in the deli store. Some of them were put on the shelves and sold in grocery stores, and some were kept for her own consumption. The package she gave to Yang Shengqing included a jar of stewed bear paws, a soup pot of snake meatballs, and a lot of dried meat. Yang Shengqing sent a happy emoticon after receiving it, and then went to enjoy the food. Shen Yizi taught him to use the emoticon package. Chatting without emoticons is simply soulless. Shen Yizi reported this problem to the backend of the grocery store, and then the grocery store launched this new feature. Shen Yizi felt that this grocery store understood her heart very well. Qin Kaiu, who had deep ambitions and fame, calmly lit a cigarette. Shen Yizi was drawn back to her attention by the baby dragon trying hard to climb on top of her. Seeing that she finally looked at it, the baby dragon shrugged its nose and had tears in its big blue eyes. It looked really pitiful. She was immediately struck by the cuteness, and quickly picked it up and rubbed it against her nose. "Don't cry, baby, mommy will feed you something delicious right now." Wait a minute, why did she call herself mother? I was really dominated by the explosive maternal nature. Fortunately, Xiaolong probably doesn't understand. The little dragon became happy again after being fed, his tail wrapped around her, and he nuzzled her with a look of attachment and admiration. The little dragon finally broke out of its shell and soon fell asleep, but still refused to let go of Shen Yizi, so he fell asleep holding her arm. Shen Yizi waited until it fell asleep before slowly taking it down and putting it into the small nest arranged for it. When it turned over uneasily and seemed about to wake up, she quickly stuffed her own handkerchief into its arms. Xiaolong sniffed her scent on the veil and fell asleep peacefully again. Shen Yizi breathed a sigh of relief and left gently, leaving the space. Looking at the time, it was already 2 o'clock in the morning. Why hasn't Goose Whitting come back yet? I couldn't help but feel worried. Shen Yizi took out the shadow stone and sent him a message. "Xueting, are you okay?" In Prince Chen's mansion, Goose Whitting, who was sitting against the tombstone, noticed the movement of the shadow stone in his arms. Then he came out of his daze, opened the shadow stone, looked at Shen Yizi's face, touched the concern in her eyes, and listened. Her voice instantly dispelled the haze surrounding her heart. He desperately wanted to see her. After Shen Yizi sent the message, he expected to receive a reply after a while, so he took out the midnight snack and placed it on the table. It is a clear soup pot, light but nourishing. There are fish balls, green vegetables, ice python meat sliced as thin as paper and several other side dishes next to it. We eat and chat while thinking about it, which makes us happy. Shen Yizi looked at the exquisite plates on the table with satisfaction and took a picture with a photo stone. At this time, she couldn't help but miss her mobile phone. She took photos without sending them to Moments. She always felt that something was missing. Before she put down the shadow stone, a familiar breath surrounded her from behind. Goose Whitting wrapped his arms tightly around her, buried his head in her neck, and deeply smelled her scent. Shen Yizi wanted to turn around, but he restrained her waist. "Don't move, let me hold her for a while." As soon as she heard his voice, she realized that something was wrong with his mood. But since he didn't want to talk now, she didn't ask and just let him hold her quietly. The soup pot is gradually boiling, the milky white soup is bubbling in the middle, the steam is spreading, and a strong fragrance penetrates people's noses. Shen Yizi put his hand on his and said softly, "Eat something. When my stomach is full, I can no longer think about unhappy things in my mind." Goose Whitting did not move or respond. Shen Yizi continued, "Can I feed you?" in a coaxing tone. Goose Whitting finally responded, "Okay." Shen Yizi boiled a piece of meat and fed it to his mouth on a plate. Goose Whitting opened his mouth and ate obediently. In the hot air, he looked at her with a pair of clear and dark eyes, and he would not refuse any food she fed. Shen Yizi looked at him with affection, and unconsciously responded to Qingbao's attitude, "Would you like to eat a piece of green vegetables?" The fresh and tender cabbage heart can be eaten after being lightly blanched, with a hint of sweetness. The doting in her tone made Goose Whitting's heart boil. He hugged her and nuzzled her coquettishly. "I just want to call you." In front of the woman he loves, Men always have a childish side. After dinner, Goose Whitting carried Shenya's Hi-Fi up to the roof. It had just snowed in the evening. At this time, the fields were covered in snow, the sky was clear and the moon was bright, and the air was exceptionally crisp. Goose Whitting was wearing a large robe, and he wrapped Shenyazi completely in it. The two of them formed a world of their own. Then he began to tell the truth about what he had learned during his trip. Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 575. The Domain Lord's Mansion, Chongfang Pavilion. In the room, Xiao Lizu slept a little uneasily, with his eyebrows furrowed and a light cough coming from his throat from time to time. I went out during the day and ended up getting cold. But she didn't want to disturb the maid, so she suppressed her cough subconsciously and huddled under the quilt. A thick black shadow spread out from the ground, and finally gathered into a human shape, but its feet were still connected to the ground. It slid to the bed like running water, passed through the bed curtain, got into the quilt, and was submerged in Xiao Lizu. In vivo. Her coughing stopped, and her face showed struggle, looking a bit ferocious. Finally, her expression calmed down. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and curled her lips into a smile. Her smile was charming and full of enchanting charm, completely different from the original Xiao Lizu. In fact, the person lying on the bed at this time is no longer Xiao Lizu, but a succubus who succeeded in seizing the body. That day Zhao Fulan was killed by a single blow from the imperial master. Although the succubus hiding in her sea of consciousness was implicated and seriously injured, she was a demon and had a long life and escaped. She has been wandering around these days, absorbing all kinds of negative emotions overflowing from human beings to strengthen herself, while looking for a host suitable for her to stay. The so-called contract between her and Zhao Fulan was just a way for her to fool Zhao Fulan. In fact, she did not conclude a contract with her, but used her as a host, constantly bewitching her to bring out the dark side in her heart to nourish herself. She originally wanted to wait for Zhao Fulan to become a puppet of desire and devour her in one fell swoop. Who would have thought that she was so useless and was easily killed, which wasted all the efforts she had put into her in the early stage. Knowing that Goose Whitting had come to the north, she also came all the way to the north. Who would have thought that she would meet a more suitable host here than Zhao Fulan? After devouring Zhao Fulan's weak soul, she knew all about her experiences from childhood to adulthood. From then on, she was Xiao Lizu. This time, she will definitely not be as careless as last time. The succubus got out of bed and wanted to see with her own eyes what she looked like now. The maid who was sleeping on the footrest was awakened by her movement. "Miss, do you want to get up for the night? I will help you over." The succubus glanced at her, with red light flowing in his eyes, and his voice was full of temptation. "Leave me alone, continue to sleep with you." The maid said oh in a daze, lay back down again, and closed her eyes. The succubus was satisfied, and the succubus walked barefoot to the dressing table, her face clearly reflected in the glass water mirror. She looked left and right, generally satisfied, but her complexion was too pale, lacked energy and blood, and looked very poor. This is not possible. In the past, every part of her Mi-Yang was beautiful and full of temptation. From her hair to the tips of her toes, everything was so perfect that it was heartbreaking. Now that this body belongs to her, she has to take good care of it. Once he has taken care of this body, I don't believe that Goose Whitting can escape from her grasp. Mi-Yang caressed her face gently and smiled like a poppy. Just as he was about to turn around and leave, he caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of his eye. That is an 8-treasure mother-of-pearl box, inlaid with various gemstones, which is dazzling but not cluttered. There were many scattered small items inside, including strings of pearls, earrings, gems, etc., mixed together. What attracted her was the mini and exquisite plate inside. The plate is no bigger than a ring. The material looks like jade but not jade, like porcelain but not porcelain. It is cool and moist in the hand. There are some stream of consciousness lines drawn on the plate. It looks messy, but it is actually made of someone. Plant ancient texts. Writing is reincarnation disc. Mi Yang was frozen in place by these three words. Those who cultivate immortality should not forget to cultivate their mind while cultivating their body. If their state of mind is not up to par, then they should not even think about improving their cultivation level, especially the state of mind becomes more and more important as they go on. How to improve your mood? The simplest and most direct way is to join the world and experience more love, hate and resentment. The more you experience it, the better your mood will naturally be. When you join the world, you will inevitably be entangled with the fate of others and be affected by cause and effect. This is unavoidable. But if there is a reincarnation chart, this is not a problem at all. When a monk enters the reincarnation disc, his memory will be sealed, and then he will be assigned a new memory, and he will experience a completely different life. Life after life, until everything is broken, he can escape from the reincarnation disc. In this way, it is difficult not to improve your state of mind. It can be said that the reincarnation disc is a cheating device for improving your mood. But since it exists, it means that God recognizes it. In ancient times, countless people were competing for the reincarnation disc. Mi Yang did not expect that the reincarnation disc would appear so low-key in the dressing box of a boudoir woman. However, since she discovered it, it means that she is destined to this thing, right? The reincarnation disc is of no use to them demons, but what if it is used on monks? She suddenly became more confident in capturing goose whitting. Mi Yang played with the reincarnation disc with her fingertips, her eyes filled with smoke and determination to win. Zhenshanju. Gu 11 woke up from her hangover, sat up, and subconsciously rubbed her head. After drinking so much wine yesterday, she now had a headache all day long. After rubbing it for a few times, he suddenly realized, your head doesn't seem to hurt at all? Not only did I not have a headache, I didn't feel any discomfort in my body. I even felt refreshed because I slept extremely well that night. He strode to the window, opened it, and took a deep breath of the cold, fresh air, sweeping away the remaining anxiety. I have never felt so relaxed. Mei Yu walked in with a tray and saw him standing by the window, barefoot and wearing only a thin middle coat, blowing in the wind. She was immediately out of breath. Young master, even if you are not afraid of the severe cold, you cannot waste your body like this. She put down the tray, took off the big robe hanging on the screen and draped it on him. Then she pulled him back to the bed, sat him down, and knelt down to put on his socks herself. Gu 11 held her hand, Aunt May, I can do it myself. Mei Yu no longer insisted. After finishing everything, Gu 11 sat down behind the food table. As soon as she picked up the chopsticks, a scene suddenly flashed in her mind. He tilted his head, poked his cheek with his fingers, and smiled stupidly at Shenyazi, who was holding a slate in front of him. However, no matter how many there are, I can't remember them. Gu 11 pressed her forehead and said, Aunt May, I didn't do anything strange after I was drunk yesterday, right? Mei Yu was serving food to him and looked at him after hearing this. You were already asleep when King Chen and his wife left yesterday. There was nothing wrong with you. As for whether she had done anything strange in the house before, she didn't know. Gu 11 held her chopsticks, feeling uneasy and decided to ask Shenyazi in person. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 576. After dinner, I got Goose Whitting's address from the maid, and Gu 11 rode there without missing a second. Arrived at the door of Gu's mansion, he dismounted his horse, tied the horse to the horse post at the door, and knocked on the door. Shi Hu poked his head out and saw the tall and handsome young man standing at the door. He asked in surprise, "Who are you looking for?" Gu 11 smiled at him and said, "I'm looking for my brother-in-law." When he learned that the uncle he was looking for was Gu Switing, Shi Hu was even more surprised. "Aren't the prince's nephews all in the imperial capital? I haven't heard of any prince coming to the north." He went in and made the announcement, and Gu Switing knew that it was Gu 11 who was here, let him in. When Gu 11 came in, she saw Gu Switing and Shen Yizi having breakfast. There was a large table of porridge, noodles, snacks, and various side dishes. They were all delicious, and they ate much better than he did. Even though she had just eaten, Gu 11 felt hungry again when she saw the table in front of her. So when Shen Yizi asked him if he had eaten, and if he had not eaten, he sat down to eat together. He sat down naturally. He scooped up a bowl of porridge, and as soon as he tasted it, his speed increased silently. He knew yesterday that this little ant was a good cook, but because she was eating from a shabu-shabu pot, and the soup pot was still based on a pot of soup he had cooked before, the taste was limited. But the taste of the porridge today surprised him, not only the taste, but also the aura that entered his belly along with the food. Every bite of porridge is full of spiritual energy. This porridge is definitely made from spiritual rice, as are the lean meats and vegetables in it, which is why it tastes so smooth and delicious. Just this bowl of porridge was worth more than half a month of meditation. After finishing the meal, Gu 11 made up her mind to come here often for meals. He wiped his mouth and said, "Auntie, I didn't do anything strange after I was drunk yesterday, right?" Shen Yizi couldn't help but smile in his eyes when he talked about this, but he deliberately asked him, "What are the strange things you are talking about?" Gu 11 coughed lightly and said, "Little ant, please stop teasing me. What is that square, palm-sized stone you were holding yesterday?" He suspected what kind of magic weapon the stone was and recorded all his predicament yesterday. If that's really the case, is it too late for him to destroy the evidence now? Shen Yizi raised his eyebrows. "You really want to know? Then I'll tell you." She took out the recording stone and said, "This is called a recording stone. It can record what people say and do." Gu 11's heart skipped a beat. What he worried about had come true. She just hoped that he didn't do anything too disgraceful to his image when he was drunk yesterday, otherwise it would be a black history for the rest of his life. "Do you want to see what you look like when you're drunk?" Shen Yizi asked him with a smile. Gu 11 wanted to refuse, but she was extremely curious, so she moved closer. A man appeared on the photo stone, walking in a catwalk with his hips swaying and his waist swaying. He was wearing a bright red robe, posing, and had a silly smile on his face that he thought was charming. A burst of devilish laughter came from inside. Needless to say, this laughter came from the little ant next to him, who was suppressing a laugh at the moment. Gu 11 felt so ashamed that she wanted to find a hole in the ground and crawl into it. She reached out and tried to the shadow stone from Shen Yizi, but she changed her hand and threw the shadow stone to Gu Switing. Gu 11 didn't dare to grab anything from Gu Switing's hand, so she could only sit back with a dull face. Shen Yizi comforted him without any sincerity. "Xiao Zixi, when people are drunk, they usually release their nature and do things they usually want to do but can't do. This of yours is nothing. Don't worry, I won't do it." This spread. "Thank you very much, Auntie," Gu 11 said without being comforted. Shen Yizi waved his hand. "You're welcome, you are Shueting's nephew. You are also my nephew. We are all one family." Gu 11 rolled her eyes and said, "In that case, then little auntie wouldn't mind having me as an extra person at the dinner table, right?" "No problem, you are welcome to come and eat every day. For the things of cooking, for her, who is always burning, it is a trivial matter." Not to mention that one more, just 7 or 8 will be completely hold. From this day forward, Gu 11 started a life of eating every day, and her life became more enjoyable. That day, he brought a piece of news. The emperor was seriously ill in bed and could not handle the affairs of the state, so he ordered the prince to supervise the country, and the ministers assisted him. In fact, Gu Swiding already knew about this matter in advance, because the national master was behind the whole thing and even communicated with him after it was over. Gu 11 had been in a very uneasy mood after receiving the news, but when she came to the Gu mansion and saw that Gu Swiding still looked calm, the restlessness in her heart calmed down inexplicably. Brother-in-law, I have been waiting for this opportunity for many years. If I want to pull him down from the throne and eradicate the prince's party, will you stand on my side? Gu 11 stared without blinking, looking at Gu Swiding. At this moment, Shen Yizi, who was not far away, let out a cry of pain. Gu Swiding immediately stopped caring about him and hurried over. Just now, Shen Yizi took out the sweet potatoes that were almost roasted in the stove with tongs, and then started to break them directly. The result can be imagined. The sweet potatoes that were freshly baked were extremely hot, so even with her current ability to resist heat, she couldn't handle it. Gu Swiding saw that her hand was red with heat, so he held her hand and blew it on her. Seeing Gu 11 looking over and looking at them with a rather indescribable look, Shen Yizi felt a little embarrassed and pulled his hand back. Okay, it's not hot anymore. Let's eat sweet potatoes, freshly baked and runny. Hard roasted sweet potatoes are so sweet that they burst with oil. Just leave this kind of thing to me. Gu Swiding took the sweet potato from her hand, broke it open, handed half of it to Gu 11, and wrapped the other half in oil paper before giving it to Shen Yizi. Gu 11 clicked her tongue twice in her heart and took a bite of the sweet potato. Phew, it was so hot. But it also smells so good. On the other hand, Shen Yizi dug out the food with a spoon. He first took a large spoonful and fed it to Gu Swiding, and then started eating himself. Gu Swiding saw that she was eating happily, and the corners of her mouth could not help but curl up. Gu 11 silently looked away to avoid being stuffed with dog food. Gu Swiding took out the roasted water chestnuts and began to peel them. Fresh water chestnuts are sweet, tender, and crispy, but roasted water chestnuts have a different flavor, but they are troublesome to eat because the outer skin is not easy to peel. Gu Swiding didn't mind the trouble. He took some tweezers and peeled off the outer peel bit by bit. After peeling off one peel, he put it on a plate aside. Shen Yizi could take it any time he wanted to eat. While peeling it, he slowly returned to the previous topic. Now is not the best time to take action. Please be patient first. This sentence has already made his position clear. The cherished heart was immediately calmed. With the support of his uncle, he is still afraid of a ball. So he ate the sweet potatoes more happily. Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 577. After the meal, Gu 11 suggested, let's go to Bailong Lake for a stroll. When winter comes, Bailong Lake will be covered with a thick layer of ice. Many people in the city like to play on the ice on the lake, and there are many other places nearby. It's a great place to visit with a view that's rare to see anywhere else. Shen Yizi was confused. Bingzi. Gu 11 gave it up and said, you'll find out when you go. After arriving, Shen Yizi knew that ice skating meant skating. Of course, it was not limited to skating, but a series of ice activities including skating, such as ice polo, ice kaju, ice rowing, etc. At this time, the shoes worn for skating were called skate shoes. As the name suggests, the shoes were not equipped with wheels, but thick knife-like bottoms. The skaters would also hold two long poles in their hands, similar to ski poles, used to control direction and braking. Bailong Lake is very big, and there are many people playing on the lake. After all, there are no other recreational activities in the winter, so ice playing is the best choice. The frost willows unique to the north are planted on the shore, and their snow-white branches hang down like a curtain of snow. Farther away, there is a large pine forest. The pine trees are covered with white snow, which is set against the clear blue sky. It is so beautiful that it is ethereal and clear. This is a world as clean as glass. Shen Yazi couldn't help but sigh, it's so beautiful. Gu 11 was a little proud, really. The three of them came to the lake. Gu 11 said to Shen Yazi and the other two, just wait, I'll buy 3 pairs of skates over there. There is a lot of traffic by the lake, and traders who are good at detecting business opportunities come here one after another, set up stalls and start business. There are several shops selling skates and shoes alone. Gu 11 came back soon, carrying 3 pairs of shoes in her hand. The upper part of skate shoes is very similar to clogs. You only need to put the shoes directly on them and then tie them with laces. Shen Yazi was wearing it for the first time, and she was still a little unsteady and almost fell down. Fortunately, Gu Switting caught her. Gu 11 laughed and gloated on the sidelines. Shen Yazi supported Gu Switting, squatted down, grabbed a handful of snow and threw it at him. Gu 11 laughed and dodged, "Little ant, I'm going to leave first." As he spoke, he slid into the lake and swung away as light and graceful as a crane. Gu 11 was a master of Bing 11, and she wanted to show off in front of Gu Switting, so she tried her best to show off her superb skating skills, and because she was wearing a scorching red dress, she instantly attracted the attention of many people. Sight. Shen Yazi chuckled to himself, what a coquettish guy. She can also skate, and her skills are quite good, but she is still a little uncomfortable with the skate shoes of this era. For a while, let alone skating, it is a little difficult to stand. She couldn't help but think of the time when she first learned to skate. Seeing that Gu Switting has been standing steadily and can act as her support, Shen Yazi couldn't help but ask, have you ever known how to skate before? That's right, he has been in the Northland for 8 years. How could he not enjoy a national sport like Bingzi? However, to her surprise, Gu Switting shook his head, this is my first time playing. He has been in the Northland for 8 years, but he spent most of that time in the military camp and did not pay attention to these recreational activities. It can be said that before meeting her, his life was peaceful and deserted. Of course, he didn't feel that way at the time. Now, with her by his side, he feels that life is so enjoyable. Sensing her doubts, Gu Switting held her waist, lowered his head and said in her ear, try to move the spiritual energy to your legs to make your body slightly off the ground, so that you can stand firm. I see. Shen Yazi tried it. Well, his body was off the ground, so he didn't have to worry about falling. Seeing that she no longer needed to hold him up to stand steady, Gu Switting couldn't help but regret. He should have told her later, so that he could enjoy the feeling of her clinging to him for a while longer. However, it is another kind of enjoyment to see her gliding freely on the lake with a smile as pure as ice crystals on her face. Shen Yazi gradually mastered the skill of skating on skates, and became more and more slippery. He was like a light butterfly on the lake, spinning and gliding in various dazzling postures. Gu Switting was just walking leisurely on the lake, his eyes always chasing her figure. Shen Yazi skated in front of him, circled around him a few times, then held his hand and invited him, skate with me. So the single person became a double person, and they galloped on the icy lake together. In order to have more fun skating, Shen Yazi gradually brought Gu Switting to a corner of the lake far away from the crowd. Here, the two of them were like a pair of swans hiding from the world, showing off their graceful and tacit understanding. In this corner of the glazed ice crystal world, they stared at each other, smiles spreading in their eyes and hearts. Although they were far away from the crowd, the form of double skating was still a brand new form of skating in this era, not to mention their posture was so light and graceful, it was like dancing on the ice. Gradually, many people were attracted to it. He noticed this and gathered around to watch the two people's performance. Shenyazi rose into the air, and was caught firmly by Goosewitting after landing. He held her waist, and the two of them spun around the ice lake together. This beautiful scene was fixed in everyone's minds, and a burst of warm applause sounded. Xiao Lizu, to be precise, happened to see the scene when Mi Yang came. Her eyes darkened, but then she laughed. Goosewitting and Shenyazi, these two really show off their affection all the time. She wanted to see if they could maintain such a touching love after entering the cycle of reincarnation. Sister, what a coincidence, we meet again. When Shenyazi and Goosewitting came ashore, Mi Yang walked over with just the right amount of surprise on her face. Shenyazi looked up, saw it was her, and said with a smile, "Yes, you come here to play too." Mi Yang nodded, "Sister, I saw you skating together when I came here just now. It's really enviable." Shenyazi paused in his heart. Was he envious of her skating with Goosewitting? Is she overthinking it? Mi Yang lowered her eyes and looked a little gloomy. "I have been in poor health since I was a child, and my mother didn't allow me to play with this." Shenyazi felt that he might have thought too much just now. This little girl was just feeling bad because of her poor health. But she found that she looked much better this time than the last time she saw her. "Sister, can you teach me how to skate?" Mi Yang bit her lower lip and mustered up the courage to look at her. Before Shenyazi could say anything, the maid behind her expressed her objection. "Miss, you can't do it. You just walked away from the cold, how could you dash?" Mi Yang looked back at her and said, "I know my health. I'm much better." The maid hesitated to speak and said nothing more. Mi Yang held Shenyazi's hand and begged, "Sister, are you okay?" Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 578. Shenyazi put his fingers on Mi Yang's wrist and felt her pulse. Her body was not as sick as she thought, so she did not refuse. "Okay, but you can't stay on the lake for a long time. You can only play for a moment at most." Belle. Even if her body is not weak, she is still an ordinary person. If she stays on the ice lake for a long time, the cold will easily invade her body. Mi Yang smiled brightly, "Thank you, sister." Seeing the pretty girl with such a bright smile, Shenyazi felt a little better. However, Goosewitting on the side was not in a good mood. He originally planned to continue spending time with Zhizi, but unexpectedly, a person suddenly appeared, interrupting their solitude, and wanted to take Zhizi from his side. "Take it with you." However, Zhizi has already agreed, so he can't say anything. With the help of the maid, Mi Yang put on skates, but she almost fell down when she stood up. Shenyazi hurriedly caught her, half supporting and half carrying her, and slowly slid towards the field. Goosewitting followed him neither far nor close. Goo 11 slipped over at some point and patted Goosewitting on the shoulder. "Uncle, how about we have a competition?" Goosewitting said coldly, "No." Goo 11 clicked her tongue and didn't force it. She stood with her arms crossed and watched Shenyazi teaching Mi Yang to skate not far away. "Isn't that the third young lady of the Xiao family? How come she is with her aunt?" Beimiao City is Goo 11's base, so he knows the situation in the city very well, and he can recognize the people around Shenyazi at a glance. In his impression, the third young lady was frail and sick and rarely went out. It was really strange that she came to Bailong Lake today. Goosewitting stated the facts very calmly. She begged Zhizi to teach her how to skate, but Zhizi couldn't do it, so she had to agree. "Sister, how about we make a bet?" Mi Yang said suddenly. "Shenyazi, what are you betting on?" "Just bet, who does Goosewitting belong to in the end?" "How about it?" Mi Yang changed from her previous delicate character. Her tone and eyes became provocative, and she was completely different from before. The smile on Shenyazi's face faded and he frowned. "Do you know Shweting, and are you deliberately approaching us?" At this time, She only thought that Mi Yang was a woman who admired goose-whitting. Mi Yang gave her a smile without comment. That weird yet inevitable smile made Shenyazi's hair stand on end, as if he was being stared at by a beautiful snake. She waved her hand and pushed her away, but Mi Yang fell down with her in her arms. The originally hard ice turned into an illusion, and the two of them fell straight down. Zhizi Goosewitting rushed over like a stream of light, but failed to catch Shenyazi, and instead fell down with him. It all happened so fast, and the three people disappeared out of thin air in the blink of an eye. Gu 11 rushed over, but the place was still covered with hard and smooth ice. Uncle. Little ant. The thing that sucked the three people in was naturally the reincarnation disc. After Mi Yang got the reincarnation disc, she had today's plan in mind, but before implementing the plan, she had to let the reincarnation disc recognize her as the master. Only the owner of the reincarnation disc can enter it and experience it, so that his memory will not be sealed. In this way, she could stay awake and get close to Goosewitting to attack him. While trying to communicate with the samsara disc, she discovered that the instrument spirit of the samsara disc still retained consciousness, which made communication simple. She threatened the reincarnation disc spirit. If it did not recognize her as its master, she would use demonic energy to corrode it, corrupt it, and turn it from a divine weapon into a magical weapon. Of course, it would take at least hundreds of years to corrode a divine weapon into a piece of demonic energy. Regardless of whether Goosewitting can live until that time, she alone cannot wait that long. So she didn't expect this threat to make Samsara Pan surrender. She still had many moves waiting for her. Who would have thought that the reincarnation disc would give in so easily? This makes Mi Yang feel a little complacent. It seems that although she has fallen now, she was still the leading demon among the demons back then. Her charm is still unstoppable, and even artifacts such as the reincarnation disc cannot resist it. After the negotiation was completed, the two concluded a contract. At first, Mi Yang thought that the reincarnation disc would do something during the contract, but after the contract, she was indeed able to control it freely, so she felt relieved. After a few days of getting used to the reincarnation disc, she felt that it was almost done, so she made the trip today. Logically speaking, her target is Goosewitting, a man who is most likely the clone of the God Emperor. There is absolutely no need to bring Shenyazi into reincarnation, but the two of them look like they are as deep in love as the sea and are unwavering in their love. Well, she felt it was an eyesore when she saw it. So she wanted to see how two people who had entered reincarnation, lost their memories, and been assigned new identities could still be in love. At that time, it will be very interesting for them to meet but not know each other. Thinking about this, Mi Yang became more and more looking forward to it. Asterisk. Mi Yang opened her eyes and found herself lying on a large, soft, and unique bed. The furnishings in the room were unlike anything she had ever seen before. She got up and got out of bed, and found that she was wearing an extremely revealing dress. There were only two thin straps on the shoulders, no sleeves, her arms were clearly exposed, and a large piece of her chest was exposed. Exposed. Even though she was a succubus, she had never worn such an immoral dress. Well, immorality and so on are really not suitable to be used on her, after all, she is an immoral existence. She walked to the dressing table, and an extremely detailed figure was reflected in the mirror. It was really fine, after all, it was clearer than any mirror she had ever used. As the owner of the reincarnation disc, the memory will not be sealed, but similarly, a memory that fits the identity will not be arranged. This also leads to the fact that Mi Yang now has no idea about her identity and everything around her. Known. However, this is quite interesting. Mi Yang smiled at herself in the mirror. She was a succubus. No matter where she went, no matter how the situation changed, as long as she used her charm, no one could help but fall under her skirt. So, what else is there to worry about? What's more, This is the world of experience in the reincarnation disc, and she is the master of the reincarnation disc. Xiaopan, tell me about my situation. Small plate is the name she gave to the spirit of the reincarnation disc. Although the samsara chart does not accept it, its opinion is not important. Samsara Pan answered her question in a straightforward manner. Your name is Xiao Lizu, and your identity is the adopted sister and secretary of the wealthy businessman Gu Swiding. What is a secretary? After the explanation of the reincarnation disc, Mi Yang was very satisfied with the identity assigned to her by the reincarnation disc. She is Gu Swiding's adopted sister in life. At work, she is Gu Swiding's right-hand man and is highly valued by him. She is the woman closest to Gu Swiding in both life and work. Very good, this will also make it easier for her to defeat Gu Swiding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 579. Through various science popularizations on the reincarnation disc, Mi Yang has a general understanding of the world. This is a world composed entirely of mortals. There are no immortal cultivators, no monsters, and no magic weapons, but this world has lamps that can shine, cars with four wheels that are not slow, and phones that can talk over long distances. This world is so amazing. The most important thing is that women here can wear revealing skirts and walk on the street openly. Although there are still many diehards who think this is immoral and believe that women should stay at home and take care of their husbands and children as before, under the impact of Western ideas, countless young people have accepted the new and open Western style. There is also a special school for girls here. Girls can also go out to school, make friends, and participate in various gatherings. When she learned all this, Mi Yang felt that this world was really in line with her taste. If this wasn't the world of experience and she was here to attack Gu Swiding, she really wouldn't mind staying here for a few more decades. Miss, breakfast is ready. A maid came to the door and said. Mi Yang was sitting in front of the dressing table, trying out the new cosmetics. She was extremely talented in this area. Although it was her first time seeing her, she quickly mastered the method and gave herself a perfect makeup. Her appearance, which was already very good, is even more outstanding now. When she stood up and turned around, the maid was stunned and sincerely praised, Miss, you are so beautiful today. Am I not beautiful in the past? No, 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 you are beautiful any day, but you are especially beautiful today. Mi Yang was amused and said, the little girl's mouth is so sweet. Here, let's buy some candy. She casually took out $2 silver, the money of this era, from her bag and gave them to the maid. The maid was in disbelief and overjoyed, blowing one string after another of rainbow farts. Mi Yang liked people to praise her the most, so she didn't stop her. She listened to the little maid's praise in a good mood, and found a rose-red cheongsam from the closet to change into. The cheongsam was extremely close to the body, revealing her slim figure. Mi Yang stood in front of the full-length mirror and admired it for a long time, once again sighing in her heart about the benefits of this era. Going downstairs to the dining table, there was already a dazzling array of food on the table. Cherry, the little maid who had called her down to dine earlier, came out with a bowl of bird's nest porridge and placed it in front of her. While eating bird's nest porridge, Mi Yang communicated with the reincarnation disc in her mind to learn more. At first she was wondering why her foster sister didn't have dinner with Gu Swiding. After asking about the reincarnation disc, she found out that Gu Swiding and she didn't live in the same place. The small Western-style building she was living in was a place given to her by Gu Swiding. However, her residence was not far from his, just a street apart. Mi Yang's eyes flashed. It seemed that the first step was to try to move out from here and live with Gu Swiding. Living under the same roof Isn't it natural to fall in love with her for a long time due to her charm? After eating, Mi Yang got in the car and headed to work. The car had a black shell and was much shorter than the carriage. She almost hit her head when she got in. Following the episode that almost hit her head, Mi Yang got carsick again. Sitting in the back seat, as the car bumped and smelled the unpleasant smell, her whole body felt bad. If there's anything bad about this world, it's the air. This is a word she just learned. It smells so bad. There is no harm without comparison. In the original world, she still disliked the thin spiritual energy, but here not only is there no spiritual energy, the air is also filled with a strange smell. That strange smell comes from the back of the car on the street. She covered her mouth and nose all the way. When she felt like she was suffocating, she finally arrived at her destination. It is a tall building that stands out from the crowd, trendy and stylish. This is where she works. Samsara Pan, this whole building belongs to Gu Swiding. Originally, when Mi Yang heard that Gu Swiding was a wealthy businessman, she thought it was a bit ridiculous. After all, in her original understanding, the status of a businessman could not be lower. No matter how rich she was, she would not want to wear purple clothes and live in a high-rise building. But that doesn't seem to be the case in this world. There is no so-called royal family or imperial power here anymore. People here often shout slogans such as democracy and equality. There are no more rules about food, clothing, housing, and transportation. As long as you have money, you can wear a whole dragon robe. Mi Yang put on her shawl and got out of the car gracefully and calmly. With the previous lesson, she will never hit her head again, and she is self-taught and shows her best posture when getting off the car. Mi Yang carried a small handbag and entered the building. Along the way, people turned around 100%, and people nodded to her from time to time. "Good morning, Secretary Xiao. Secretary Xiao is so beautiful today." Amidst the eyes of people who were either obsessed with her, pursued by her, flattered by her, envied, Mi Yang made her debut and walked into her office very naturally. The office is spacious and bright, with red leather sofas, gorgeous water mirror lamps, spotless Persian carpets. Looking around, Mi Yang smiled. She put down her small bag and came to the high-pointed window. From here, she had an excellent view and could take in a panoramic view of the scene several streets away. In the office, there is also a lounge with tables, chairs, beds, wardrobes, and even a bathroom. Mi Yang inspected her territory and praised Samsara Pan. "The status assigned to me is very good, I like it." After the visit, Mi Yang went out to find Gu Swiding. His office is next door to hers. It is larger than hers, but the overall tone is dark black, simple and cold, and full of strong personal style. Unfortunately, she didn't see anyone when she went in. After asking Gu Swiding's assistant, she found out that he had gone to the factory early in the morning. She heard that something happened there last night. A group of young students under the banner of patriotism secretly sneak in and wreak havoc, saying that he wants to knock down the capitalists who human blood. Mi Yang waited all morning but didn't even wait for Gu Swiding to come back. She was thinking about going there to have a look. After looking at herself in the mirror, she gave up the idea. She wears palm-high high heels and a cheongsam that will split when she walks. She is so beautifully dressed, how can she go to such a messy place like a factory? She must appear in front of Gu Swiding in her best appearance, leaving a deep impression on him the first time he sees her. It is best if he cannot stop being obsessed with her. Don't be in a hurry, the days ahead will be long. After all, there is no woman closer to Gu Swiding than her. With this idea in mind, Mi Yang Raiders Gu Swiding was not in a very urgent mood. Even after lunch, she went to the shopping mall opposite the building with great interest and did some shopping. Ah, shopping is such a pleasant thing. I wonder what kind of situation Shenyazi is in now? The identity she arranged for her was a female prostitute. Probably to deal with those fat and greasy men. Thinking of this, Mi Yang felt better and even hummed a ditty. Adorable baby, the miracle doctor is so awesome. Author, 955. Chapter 580. The lotus leaves are in the fields, the boat is painted and the rain sleeps, the east wind blows in the small building last night, when will Yulang go to Wushan together in the clouds and rain? Shen Yizi woke up and heard this sultry song like spring water in his ears. She felt like she had had a long dream. In the dream, there were parents, a master, a lover, and a child, but the moment she opened her eyes, everything in the dream receded like a tide. Her memory was blank for a moment, but then she remembered. Her name is Shen Yizi, she comes from the Shen family, a large family in Su City, and she is 18 years old this year. At the instigation of her best friend Luo Jinping, she eloped with her tutor. After entering the new era, the Shen family still did not change their old ways. The female members of the Shen family still wear embroidered shoes, horseface skirts, and comb their old hair, and every move is framed. It would be fine if everyone was like this, but Shen Yizi had a good friend from a family, Luo Jinping, with whom she lived a completely different life. Going to a girls' school, wearing a dress, and perming her hair into curls, every move she makes exudes the style of a new-age girl, which makes her envious. Especially Luo Jinping often mentioned the outside world to her. In Luo Jinping's description, the outside world is synonymous with freedom and brightness. In contrast, the place where she lives is simply full of decay and backwardness. Shen Yizi naturally had an infinite yearning for the outside world, so with Luo Jinping's encouragement, she bravely broke up with her family and went to a girls' school. Shen's father and Shen's mother naturally disagreed, but they couldn't bear her daughter's request. In the end, both parties took a step back and hired a tutor who had studied abroad. This tutor's name is Zhou Weiqing, a young man with handsome appearance, gentle manners, and gentle and courteous treatment of others. As they got along day by day, her heart fell in love with Zhou Weiqing. However, at this time, she learned the bad news that she had a fiancé. The other party is a very powerful person in Huading. Except that he is much older than her, there is nothing wrong with him. She was taught to abide by etiquette and rules since she was a child. After learning that she had a fiancé, although it was extremely painful, she had to restrain her emotions. At this time, Luo Jinping kept revealing news about her fiancé Gu Swiding to her. For example, he stayed in a famous romantic place in Huading for 3 consecutive months and had dinner with popular movie stars. For example, his men cut off the hands of so-and-so if he did not comply with his orders. For example, he took advantage of other people's ancestral homes and took them as his own. Based on Luo Jinping's description, she sketched in her mind the image of a demonic executioner who was lustful, killed without batting an eye, and ate people without spitting out their bones. With such a miserable fiancé on one side and a gentle and handsome tutor on the other, her girlish heart was undoubtedly inclined towards the latter. One day, Zhou Weiqing suddenly confessed to her that he wanted to elope with her. He couldn't just watch her marry a devil who was destined not to give her happiness. So, the two made some plans and eloped secretly. She thought she was running towards freedom and happiness, but she was so naive. As soon as she left Su City, Zhou Weiqing showed his true colors. He shouted at her and kicked her at worst. He even tried to cheat on her. If she hadn't sworn not to let him touch her, she would have had several abortions by now. However, what made her even more desperate was what happened later. After arriving at Huading, Zhou Weiqing sold her to the land of fireworks. That is the boat she is staying on now. The owner of the boat, Chen Sunyang, was also the madam. She bought beautiful girls and trained them carefully so that they could steal money from the powerful and wealthy businessmen. And she was imprisoned by Chen Sunyang because she refused to obey. Had she not been so beautiful, Chen Sunyang would not have been so gentle in order to avoid leaving traces on her body. After going through all the memories in her mind, Shen Yizi only felt a strong sense of dissonance, as if those memories were just forced into her mind and were not the life she had experienced personally. It gave her a strong sense of unreality. Shen Yizi got up from the couch and looked around. Just looking at the embroidered curtains and red embroidered curtains and the silk chairs and couches in this house, you can imagine how exquisite and exquisite the painting boat she is in is. The door was closed. She pulled it, but it didn't open. The door was locked from the outside. She can't get out, but no one will bother her for a while. Shen Yizi came to the window. The water outside the window was the famous Jinling River in Huading. The willow branches on the shore are swaying, and the river breeze is gentle. She was thinking about the possibility of escaping by diving, but passed after 1 second. At this moment, the door opened, and a woman in her 30s walked in. She was wearing a dark gold cheongsam embroidered with red peonies, her complexion was soft and white, and her narrow and upward eyes exuded a mysterious charm. It is expected that she was also a great beauty when she was young. This is Chen Sunyang. Change on. She threw over a smoky green cheongsam. Shen Yizi looked outside and saw 2 strong men standing at the door. Their eyes were scanning her body wildly, as if she had no clothes on. She turned her wrist and found that she had become very weak. Otherwise, the 2 strong men at the door were no match for her. Become weak? Wasn't she weak before? This doubt flashed away in his mind. Shen Yi took the cheongsam with knowledge and interest, turned it to the screen and put it on. Chen Sunyang was very satisfied with her obedience. She sat down lazily on the soft couch and lit a slender and delicate lady's cigarette. As the smoke filled the air, she said, "This time a big shot is coming. Looking at your face, I'll give you a chance. If you can't seize it, you will only be able to serve those low-life people in the future. Good thing. You have to think carefully about what to do." Shen Yizi walked out from behind the screen. At that moment, Chen Sunyang even forgot to flick the cigarette ashes and let them fall on the expensive and delicate cheongsam fabric. After coming back to her senses, she took a deep breath of cigarette, walked over and touched Shen Yizi's face. "You are lucky to have such a face, but you have to know how to make good use of it, you know? Otherwise, blessing will turn into disaster." Shen Yizi lowered his eyes and followed her out silently without responding. "Starting today, your name is Feng Zhu." After going downstairs, Chen Sunyang knew about Shen Yi, and told another charming young woman, "Huazhu, look at her, do you understand?" Huazhu wore a light purple cheongsam, with big breasts, a slim waist, and pretty hips, all showing off her beautiful figure. Feng's face is evenly flushed, her eyebrows are like smoke, and her lips are painted with a layer of very tender lipstick. It can be seen that she has made careful preparations for today's appearance. The moment she saw Shen Yizi, something flashed across her charming eyes, and she immediately smiled and took Chen Sunyang's arm. "Mom, don't worry, my daughter will definitely take good care of her sister." Chen Sunyang clapped her hands and smiled.